live at Patton. You can't be live at folks. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
it does on mine. Welcome to the January 6th reorganization meeting of Patton Township Board of Supervisors. As the 2019 Vice Chair, I am charged with opening the meeting. So as we are able, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I see that our first order of business is the election of officers. And I will entertain nominations for chair, and then we will follow that with nominations for vice chair. So any nominations for chair?
Yes, I move that we nominate Betsy Whitman as chair.
Any second? And any other nominations?
Well, do we do
does that
them,
need a
we do them
motion?
in a joint
I think
thing?
we need oh, can we do them together? Yeah. Oh, okay. I would now seek a motion for, or nomination for vice chair.
I nominate Dan Trevino.
That's an idea.
A second. You second? So any other nominations? Hearing none, I guess we take a vote. So those in favor of Betsy Whitman, myself as chair, and Dan Trevino as vice chair, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So moved, or so decided. So this is the moment for public comments. This is an opportunity for any citizen who has anything to discuss or present that is not related to any agenda items so listed to stand up and make a presentation. Is anybody interested in speaking? We have somebody coming in, interested in public comments? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. We have several items under public hearings and presentations, and it has to do with the organization of the Board of Supervisors. So the first thing we need to do is officially declare that there is a vacancy on the board.
I'll move that there is a vacancy on the board.
Second.
Second?
Third.
Okay. Okay. And
Just need a vote.
oh, so, yes, vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? I'm not used to calling.
We need to report that to the elections board, so they.
Okay. Okay, and I just want to remind everybody of the timeline for applicants to apply for this open position. The deadline for applications is this Friday, January 10th. Presentations before the board will be at a special meeting, 6 p.m. On January 22nd, which is also the same evening as our next regular meeting. Deliberations on our decision will take place at that regular meeting on the 22nd. Okay. So next, we need to look at our meeting dates coming up. And we have a list of regular meeting times that we've adhered to in the past. We will consider those with the addition of January 22nd at 6 p.m., which would be the special meeting I just mentioned. And Mr. Trevino, do you want to make a mention
I'll
about
just make a comment
March
that
11th?
on spring break week, our schedule, a proposed schedule of March 11th, I know already I'll be out of town. But if the rest of the board members will be here, there's no need, I don't see a need to cancel that or move it, reschedule it.
I will.
Okay. Great. So then I will, thanks for noting that. Elliot, sorry.
I'll be away the third week in June, but it doesn't matter because I'm also available.
Okay,
the way the other meetings.
okay, great. So I think we'll,
I'll move that we
Thanks,
adopt the
Jan.
schedule as listed in the agenda.
and a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and second. So our meeting schedule is listed in the agenda. Do I need to
No.
call it out?
it's just- We have to advertise it, so
Okay.
it'll go in, it'll be in the CDT under the legal ads,
Okay,
posted on the website.
gotcha. Okay.
So we do need a vote.
Pardon me?
A vote?
Oh,
We
we do
haven't
need a
voted
vote.
yet.
Oh,
We haven't voted on it
so we had a motion, we had a second. Those in favor?
yet.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you for the reminder. Board committee appointments. We have a number of committees that are active in Patton Township. They are listed in the agenda. I think we can just go through committee by committee and see if we want to keep the members as established in 2019. So for the Authority Board and Commissions Committee, 2 members, that's myself and Mr. Abrams. And I'm certainly willing to continue with that. Is that,
I am too, but if you're gonna send me to exec for COG, you could take that one.
I could
The
take this one.
transportation one, if you wanted. So I know you're always interested
You mean T-Lib?
in that.
Oh, we're not there yet, though. right?
Yeah, we're not
Yeah,
there quite
we're
yet.
just on the ABC committee.
It's the ABC.
Okay.
And it needs 2 people, the ABC committee, so we meet and make
That's
decisions.
fine.
Okay, great. The Center Area Cable Consortium.
I'll volunteer to be on that. if no one else
They have scheduled a meeting, they have to do an organizational meeting, they're gonna meet January 21st, which is a Tuesday at noon at College Township.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's great that Dan wants to take that.
Other than that, I don't think there'll be a lot of, a lot of meetings.
We already
Still-
approved the agreement,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's not much left.
So it should be pretty light load for the next few years.
Yeah.
Just a line on your resume.
Hmm?
It's just a line on your resume.
There you go. Your CV, Dan.
Your CV.
Okay,
I need to pad it.
You need to pat it, I know, you're looking for dollars.
okay. You might be chair next year.
That's right.
At that rate. Okay. Spring Creek Watershed Commission.
I'll
also-
continue to serve on that, but because they usually schedule their meeting the same night as Patton Township Board of Supervisors, Chris Hurley has been our alternate and attended in my place. So
Did you hear back from him?
I already talked to him before, he's
Oh, great.
willing to continue serving.
Okay. And Open Space Stewardship Committee, that's me, and I would love to continue on that as the liaison. The Center County Metropolitan Planning Organization, currently that's Mr. Abrams.
I can keep that unless you,
Okay.
okay.
It is sort of connected with transportation and land use, TLU. We haven't
Right.
got to the committee yet. Okay. Do we need to make a formal vote on that, or?
No, as long
We
as
just
you all are agreement,
Okay.
that's fine.
So as to COG committee assignments, we've got a table in our agenda. And again, I'll just go through each committee, starting with the executive. Actually, I note below that, let's see, this is a little bit confusing. Could be. So the chair and vice chair automatically serve as the representatives on the executive committee. However, Mr. Abrams has expressed an interest in serving as the chair for COG. Normally, that would be the chair of the Patton Township Board of Supervisors. But I have agreed to let Mr. Abrams serve as that. So I'm assuming then that the members on the executive committee would be you and myself. So it's the chair and the, but, whatever, it's Mr. Abrams and the chair. Okay. Public safety.
I'll continue to serve on that one.
Okay, thank you. And finance?
Would you want an alternate for public safety?
Oh, yeah.
I could,
And actually, we should, I guess we do have alternates for all of these, so we might as well continue in that vein.
So,
Yeah, it's probably best to name at least one alternate, and we can change again.
Okay.
We'll get the new person seated and see what their
So-
interests are.
Jess is the
I
alternate?
can do the alternate until we get someone
Okay.
seated, yeah.
So Jess, you're, okay,
Yeah,
great.
just give me good heads up if you need me to cover.
Oops,
but-
okay, that's got that one, gotcha. And for public safety, so we've
Yeah,
got
we
a,
just did that.
oh, that was that one, okay, so, sorry, finance.
I'll volunteer to serve on finance.
Thank you
Thank
again.
goodness.
And an alternate on that?
No.
No. Want the alternate on the finance
Okay.
committee?
Okay.
Elliot will.
Just
Okay,
make sure you go
great.
to all the meetings.
I might add at this point that we are obviously one short on the board, but it's the decision. I've talked to the manager and I talked to a couple of board members individually, that we fill every position with the assumption that when we get our fifth member, they'll be shuffled a little bit to accommodate our new member. Onto human resources, that's currently Jess, and
Yep.
you agree to continue with that, and,
I'm happy to be the alternate.
okay, we ought to look at what you're doing, Dan, because you've got a lot on your plate, I think.
Well, we're going to get a new member.
Okay.
so-
Great. Public services and environment, that's myself, and I would love to continue in that.
That's not a good alternate for me.
Okay,
The
anybody
Thursdays are
interested in
jammed.
being the alternate on that? Ellie, can I twist your arm for that?
Okay, what's the date of those meetings?
It's 12:15,
First Thursday,
yeah, second
Yeah.
Thursday, May, oh, yes, you're right,
First
first Thursday,
Thursday.
sorry, I was looking at.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
okay.
I'm pretty good at attending those.
Thanks, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you, so you don't have to worry, really.
Oh, thank you for asking.
Yeah, anytime. Okay, voluntold. Parks Capital, that's,
no, transportation land.
oh, sorry about that, thanks, Dan. So, TLU, Transportation and Land Use, and Elliot, are you willing to continue with that, with me as the alternate?
Oh, okay, unless you wanted to be the main, since you don't have to go to exec.
Well, I will be going to exec,
Oh,
I think, or I'll be the alternate for that.
right.
You could still go even if you're alternate.
That's true.
Tuesday, 12:15.
Yeah, I've got right now, the solar power purchase agreement, which
Yeah.
meets monthly, and then I also attend the working group for, I guess it's the greenhouse gas emission assessment, so those are both monthly meetings.
So
If you-
TLU's fine.
If you wouldn't mind keeping with that, and then we'll see what happens when someone comes up.
That's fine.
Okay, great, thank you. Now Parks Capital.
I can keep that, but this Thursday I cannot do, unfortunately.
Okay, cannot do this Thursday.
Can anyone cover that? Georgetown's Road? No.
I can cover that.
You're right.
Yep.
They've been really quick lately.
Okay.
And like, I don't know how much longer this committee's gonna be going on anyway.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you.
SIP.
Otherwise, you can leave me on.
Okay, so I will attend that meeting this Thursday.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Ad hoc Facilities Committee,
I'll continue serving that
thank you.
with Larry as our alternate.
I will forward you the agenda.
Oh, great, thank you, okay. And then Parks and Rec, and that, I'm assuming will be Susan Wheeler?
Yeah, and that should finish up this year. We've never had an alternate, but
Okay.
Susan's been, I would probably attend if Susan could.
Okay, great.
They should wrap up this year, I would think.
And then I actually added one other item in this chart. It's not a committee, but it is a working group, the solar power purchase agreement. And I will agree to serve on that with
I would be.
Mr. Picker as the alternate.
Can you add the recruitment and screening committee too?
The what?
The recruitment and
Oh,
screening committee
right,
that I
right, right.
chair?
Okay,
just so it's not like I'm not doing
Oh,
anything.
the search
Right.
committee?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I chair it. It's-
Yeah, I figured that was gonna carry over, so
It is.
I didn't
Yeah,
list it.
okay, great. So Jessica's also
Yeah.
active on that, that's part of the HR committee.
No, it's
Oh, no.
separate.
Oh, you're right. Oh, okay, actually, okay, great. So I think we've decided our committees,
Thank you.
and do we need a motion? for-
No, that's fine.
Okay,
Everybody's in agreement. The one thing we do need to do on the top of page 4
yeah, the alternate.
is just, confirm that alternates, including myself or Larry or whoever might be attending, if a board member can't, has the right to vote.
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Great.
Thank you.
Yep. And, let's see, next, the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, PSATs. There's a conference coming up on May 3rd through 6th, and we need to indicate our interest in going and also choose a voting delegate.
And if you have a lodging preference, let us know. We'll
Okay, and-
try to get the reservations in early this year.
Great, and I will note that I held the voting empowerment in 2018, and Jessica had it in 2019, so if there's anybody else
Let's
who
make the
might
newbie do it.
be going, we could have the newbie do it, but there could also be 2 other people chomping at the bit to do it.
I'll be going, but I don't especially care if I'm the delegate or not. If neither of you want to do it, I'll certainly do it.
Okay.
If the new member wants to do it, is it possible to change it if Dan says he wants to?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So he's not locked in?
No,
He
but
can pass
we
it
need
on.
to indicate somebody when we register,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, it's actually kind of cool.
I haven't
And
attended,
I don't mind
I've
doing
been
it. It's
attending
okay.
for several years. I'm thinking of it, but I would not want to be the voting.
Right, yeah, gives you that flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is anybody else planning to go, or?
Tentatively,
At this point, I'm planning on going.
Okay, lodging preferences, lodge or not the lodge?
Not the lodge.
Yeah,
I don't mind where we stayed last year. I mean, it's
that was
a
actually
commute-
fine.
a short commute to get back and forth, but,
Yeah.
And there was always a bus.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my preference would be that we would all be in the same hotel, which just makes it,
Okay,
Easier.
we'll try for the Hilton if we can,
okay.
because that's close, but, okay, somewhere,
Thank you.
not the lodge.
Yeah.
That's the main. All right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm losing here. Okay, and, the manager's value. Should we need a vote on, do we need a vote on the
Yes.
voting? We need a vote.
I move that Dan Trevino be our voting delegate.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Takes us to the manager's employment agreement, and we need an action to approve that, but before I take any motions, were there any comments on that?
No.
There was, Mr. Erickson and I discussed it this morning, there was one small,
Yeah,
essentially date change, you made that, I guess.
Yeah, I corrected that.
Okay,
I move we accept the employment agreement.
I second.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. So moving right along, we're at Public Works. The arborist services from Ferguson Township, and I guess you'll.
Yeah, this is just an informational item that, following up on discussions that the board had with some residents last fall about oak wilt and chestnut oak decline. I did reach out and talk to Dave Perbolk over at Ferguson Township. They have a full-time certified arborist on their staff, and they're gonna hire another person to be called a municipal tree specialist, and worked out an agreement with them, I think a fairly very reasonable rates, I thought, where we can have access, both us, staff and township residents, to their arborist for the 3 bulleted items up there, consultation services. If you think you have an issue with a tree, we can arrange to have Ferguson's arborist come out and take a look. Now, he's only going to do a visual inspection and may make recommendations from there. But, you know, he's a certified arborist, he knows his business. So that's an asset that, and the township would pay for that. And I think the rate was $54 an hour, which I think I said was I thought was very reasonable. Second item is hazard tree assessments, which staff would take advantage of. This primarily for trees in parks, or might be hanging over roadways or something where before we make a final decision whether a tree has to come down or not, we have the arborist look at it. And they have a objective rating system where they'll go through and tell us whether that tree poses a hazard to the public or not.
That's great.
So that's something that we don't do that often, maybe once or twice a year, but we'll have that access. We typically have been going to one of the other private arborists around here and have them do that when we need it. And then finally, one of the items that came out of the discussions in the fall was update our oak wilt education materials and distribute that back out before, by April 1st of this year, and then coordinate with Ferguson Township, so we're sending a single message out to everybody who lives in those neighborhoods, because the disease doesn't really recognize where it's going. But so we'll continue working with Ferguson Township on that, and if anybody's interested in the consulting services, they can contact either myself or Ken Soder, the zoning officer, and we'll make those arrangements with Ferguson Township.
That's great.
Any questions from the members of the board? I have one question concerning the hours allotted. So I'm just assuming that was a convenience number.
Yeah, it was my estimate of
Okay.
about what we would do, and, if we go a little over, I don't think it's an issue. If we think we're gonna go considerably over, we'll go back and talk to
Gotcha.
Ferguson
Okay.
Township folks, so.
So it's for their budgeting?
Yeah, so they know, how much
Gotcha.
he might be not available for them, so.
Okay, thanks. This brings us to the traffic calming program. And what we're talking about with this item is actually the process that the township has used in the past to determine which items are brought up before the board. So Doug, I guess you want to
Yeah,
explain
I
that?
was in on when we developed this originally, and it's, usually when we get inquiries about people with, speeding and things like that, and if they're, more than they just like to see some more enforcement, this is generally the information that we provide them then with there's an outline that was provided in the agenda materials, and it's a 12-step process that's there at the bottom of page 6. As I said, we've provided this to people over the years. Really nobody's gotten beyond step 4, which is go out and circulate a petition to your neighborhood and see how much local support there is. And then for one reason or another, it seems in the last couple of years we've had some requests that have gone around this process and straight to the board, and I don't, with Mr. Park's latest request, I don't know if it should have fit in here or not, so I thought it was time to bring this back up, reintroduce it. Most of the board members had probably never ever seen it before. So in short is, we have this process in place. It's been, it's there. It was the state of the art 18 years ago, and the question is, should we continue to use this policy? Are there things that we need to look at? Should it be reviewed, updated, potentially revised or replaced? Again, it's there, it's served us up to now, and I want to know what the board's opinions and directions are. And we don't have to make a final decision today either, so.
I have a question. The Scotia Road residents that petitioned for some change to the Scotia Road, Circleville intersection, did they follow this process? Because I know they came, first I heard of it was when they brought a petition.
No, we didn't, no, I mean, we more or less followed the process, but we handled it as a township matter. I mean, but we went, I mean, in lieu of petition, well, we had a petition that came in first. And then I think from there, we basically went through this process and won basically in this order. But we handled it as a township project in lieu of letting the residents take the lead on it.
And then the Tough Trees Avenue, President's Drive, that did not follow this process because it was basically the homeowner association that approached us.
Yeah.
Directly, the board.
Yeah, when they first started, it was a pedestrian safety issue, not necessarily a speeding issue, which I think it's turned back into more of a speeding issue now. But, no, I mean, when they came in with their initial concerns about pedestrian safety, it went straight to the board. And again, you know, in the future, maybe we don't. Those, you know, they come to the board and the board bounces them back to staff or something.
Then my third part of that follow-up is, from the perspective of the staff, what's the pluses and minuses? I mean, you've gone through the process without following this for those two particular cases. Can we continue to do that and just not really pay attention to this, or do you want, would you prefer that this process be followed?
Well, I guess ultimately it's up to the board to set policy.
Well, I'm asking for the staff's recommendation.
I mean, generally, if it was, you know, I would say now, if the board said, let's use this program as a first step, and our probably first response to Mr. Park would have been, here's a traffic calming issue. The new twist that Mr. Park added was the radar sign, permanent radar sign, which has never been in our tool bag before, which is probably why I pushed it right up to the board to see what kind of impact that had, or impact that might have. I would say for the run-of-the-mill things where, you know, I will tell you the streets are, they're going to end up, they're going to be like Douglas Drive and Park Forest, Clearview Avenue. Those are the kinds of streets where we're going to get these sort of things. It's the streets that probably qualify as collector streets in the township. Devonshire would probably be another one that I think we've had requests for in the past. And, you know, maybe this process needs to be revisited and updated. I know in the PennDOT's latest guidance, they had a different scoring instead of you know, the old, when we looked at whether a street was eligible or not, we only looked at you know, I think we said you had to meet 2 or 3 of these criteria between traffic volume, cut-through traffic, and speed. I think in PennDOT's latest upgrade, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items that you use to check eligibility, including crashes, presence of schools, presence of pedestrian generators. So, I mean, it may be worth at least a look to see if this might be updated and incorporate some newer items. Look and see what, you know, are there newer techniques that we should be looking at too? Is permanent radar signs part of that tool bag or not?
Elliot's got something that I'm assuming this is Mr. Park? we'll get to you after.
I think the existing system is fine when a potential project is not on our radar to begin with, if that's where it should start. But there are others, like the one with the need to do something in the Toff Trees area, that's already started, and so I think we cut to the chase and try to solve the problem with whatever method we can find. And so there are sort of two different ways of going about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, you can go with Mr. Parks.
Yeah, we've got somebody from the audience. So state your name and your address, and welcome.
Thank you. Phil Park, intersection of Cricklewood and North Parkway. First off, thank you for your concern about this. And I have not been back in touch with you since that was the middle of December, and I figured everybody had better things to do at a different pace to work. We'll start working in the middle of the year, or in the middle of January. And also, just to clarify, with respect to the item in the agenda, the request was for both a traffic table, I think that's what you call it, the long slope thing, and the radar sign, not just the radar sign. Going back to the discussion of this 12 or 14-step policy, I was here then participating as a citizen. Doug was the engineer. And I remember at one of the meetings when we had probably 15 or 20 people from the Toff Trees neighborhood there to discuss it, and this long and detailed process was being described. My neighbor, who was literally old enough to be my mother, when they were getting near the end of the presentation, they said, and then we would finally adopt some sort of implementation. And she said, in whose lifetime? She's since passed away, and we're still talking about traffic on Cricklewood. What we should be doing, instead of a formal policy that must be 10 or 12 or 14 discrete steps, is, all right, what do we need to do to solve this problem? Should there be public input? Absolutely. But does it need to be a 5-step thing where we go and circulate petitions and then have a separate meeting and so forth? Not necessarily. I think if you look for ways to condense the process without skipping any steps, but including them, that would serve everybody's interests. So thank you for your consideration.
And thank you for your comments. And I just might,
No,
did you
go
have a
ahead.
comment? No, go ahead.
I have a variety of thoughts on it. I think some of it is dated because by the time there is a traffic issue these days, everybody has already talked about it. It's not, circulating a petition is sort of unnecessary because of the way people communicate on social media and that sort of thing. I think it's a kind of silly extra step. We've already done that as a township, and I kind of like the township doing it, even though it's a fair amount of work. I sort of like the objectivity of that. I have mixed feelings about this needing majority support from citizens and that sort of thing. There are times when the majority's support is really important, and there are times when it's not. And there needs to be advocacy on a sort of minority basis. And there are all sorts of reasons that you may or may not have a majority of citizens who support something. I guess I think there needs to be flexibility in that, and this does seem pretty cumbersome, and her point is well taken, that things already take so long in government, I guess I really trust the competence of our staff now to not need this kind of guidance. I don't know what it'll be like in 10 years, and I get the sense that maybe when this came up, there were a lot of little piddly things coming at the board or something, and that maybe there was some attempt to streamline and help people prioritize. I don't think we need something this cumbersome now, and it feels a little rigid, and I have actually appreciated people coming with their neighbors and then everyone sort of brainstorming together. I think that's more efficient than this, which felt rigid. That's my thought.
I'll second that. Jess, I think My view of any issue that the residents come to us is to expedite
Right.
some kind of action by the board, if possible, to resolve the citizens' complaints. And so if you have this long process here, it's going to drag it out and drag it out. So I agree with your thoughts.
I think it discourages it, as a matter of fact. It feels a little bit like this discourages someone from bringing something to the board or bringing something to the township, but I think that's a shame.
A follow-up?
Well, I think there's some smaller issues. I mean, if you live on a street where you think that people are speeding, you may file a complaint about it and demand that something be done to calm the traffic. And it may, probably is never going to reach that point because the radar sign will be put out there, or there may be some lines drawn in the street, and it goes away quietly until the next time somebody complains. And then there are other issues like the situation in Toft Trees where we're still too slow.
And I'd like to, I guess, make a comment that reflects on comments already made. I think the most obvious sign that this process is not working is that apparently, when it's implemented in the past, no one has ever gotten past step number 4, which is the one that requires the petition circulation. And I think we all, as board and as staff, do a pretty good job of assessing the degree of importance, even if only one person comes in. But I also know that with the existence of social media, word gets out, and it's unusual if somebody comes by himself or herself. And then, of course, we have the example of the people at Marywood, who live in Marywood and were concerned about the intersection at Circleville Road and Scotia Road, and that was solved. I will say also, though, that regardless of whatever policy we have in place to bring matters before the board and the staff, it is a long process, unfortunately. We do have to do studies, and we do have to consult PennDOT sometimes, and so on and so forth. So, anyway, yes.
If I may offer one other comment that goes back to the previous agenda item, and that would be to whomever becomes the voting delegate to the PSATS convention. There are 49 states that allow municipal police to run radar. There is one that does not. And for the longest time, it was because of the representative from Altoona who absolutely refused to let that get out of the committee that he ran. I would like to suggest that the voting delegate, and especially if there's a resolution on this, which I'd be willing to bet there is every year, that the delegate vote in favor of allowing municipal police to run radar.
Mr. Park, I can confirm that this has been on PSAT's list of priorities every year. For 35 years. And PSATS always agrees. I asked Senator Corman at one meeting about this, and he said, well, the Senate has voted in favor of allowing municipalities to use radar, but the House is the stumbling block because of certain members who block it. And until someone can influence whoever the stumbling block is to stop doing it, I don't think we're going to have it.
Just very briefly, the one who was.
Can we get, just for the cameras, if you can go up to the podium, and then everyone will be privy to those.
The House member who did block it for many, many years is no longer the rep. It was Blair County.
But it still can't get a majority support in both houses, so.
So the one step that this board could take is to pass a resolution in support of that. If there is a groundswell of people interested in getting this passed, then the resolution is data or support for that. So I might suggest that if there's anybody here in the room who might want to take the lead on something like that, Mr. Park?
I was actually thinking a letter going out on township letterhead
Well, that
to our senator and however many representatives cover Patton Township now, 2, 3,
Two.
yeah.
Is that something that, yeah, Mr. Abrams?
Do we have good statistics on whether the fact that Pennsylvania doesn't have this leads to more injuries and deaths and damage on our roadways, or is that not provable?
I could try to research that for you. I don't have that right
I mean,
at hand. I can
to
tell
me,
you.
to me, that'd be the criteria, that if it's gonna make things safer, then
Well-
let's do it tomorrow morning.
We, as municipal police, we are at a huge disadvantage. It really limits us where we can run.
Yeah.
Mr. Parks is exactly right. He lives on a curved area of the roadway. We can't put in a measured speed distance in that type of roadway because the two sides of the road are different distances. So it really limits us in where we can use our speed enforcement equipment, radar, and by all means, obviously, you know, it is for safety. It's for eliminating speeding, which would reduce accidents and serious injuries resulted with accidents. So it is a safety concern. I don't have the data right in front of me, and I could try to find something if you're interested.
So,
I'm sure that the legal departments of PSATs and PML have already collected all that information. You probably don't have to do your own research.
Right.
and I'd like to say at this point that we actually are off of the agenda. We've taken a little bit of a side trail. It's a very important one. Should we put it on the agenda for next meeting and have some action, or is there some action we can take now?
on the radar for the next meeting.
Elliot,
That was a good one.
you're gonna drive me crazy. I got your back with that one, okay. Mr. Manager, can you advise on what step we as a board could take? Can we, or board, can we make a decision now?
Well, I mean, we could maintain the status quo or probably, I mean, if we get something that's, somebody says they want to come in and calm the traffic on their road, we'll continue with this. Or push most of them to the board and see what the board can bounce them back at some point.
Okay, and I apologize. The question I was asking actually was concerning this little detour that we took in our discussion about the frustration of not being able to use radar.
Oh,
So that is a separate item. Should we?
yeah, no, I'll put something, I'll draft up a resolution, put it on the
Okay, great. for
agenda.
next week. So that we can-
And then I'll work with Chief Jolly. And I don't know, I can't remember where the legislation is right now. I think it's stuck in House Committee.
Yeah, usually makes it out of House Transportation. Senate a lot of times has support, and then at the
Yeah,
House.
we'll check on where it is and
Well, this,
draft up a resolution. I
Okay.
don't.
this is an election year for House members, so this
Yeah,
might be
I-
the year that it happens. It's an election year.
Yeah, I think it's still getting stuck. There are legislatures who think municipalities will abuse it and use it as a revenue generator.
Right.
And there have been efforts in the recent past to put limits on revenue generation or just limited it to accredited police departments, of which we are one. And, you know, every year somebody reports it's gonna make it, and at the end of the day, it dies. It never makes it out of committee to a final vote, so.
Okay.
We'll
So,
get you some little more background.
did you have another comment on that?
No, going back to the agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
I think the three of us, four of us have already expressed our opinion about this procedure, and none of us think it should remain as is. We're all, I think we all want some,
Okay, well, we'll bring
Condensation,
those requests to the board
simplification.
first then.
yeah.
Okay.
I guess just the only thing I think might be useful about having some procedure is that it does give a little bit of a default if needed,
Well, I mean, we have,
right?
you know, for all these, for the ones we talked about, we've more or less followed this procedure. And I, you know, yes, it would be nice if we could short circuit it, but, you know, the Scotia one, I think we spent about a year on it, and we pretty much ticked off all those steps in one manner or another before we finally got to implementation. Toftree and Presidents, we're moving into implementation now, but, you know, it's been a discussion item for, you know, we spent a lot of time on steps 8 and 9 with, you know, alternatives, and reviewing alternatives and finally getting to the preferred alternative. You know, that's really where we spent a lot of time on Toftrees and Presidents, so.
I think there's some real
I
value.
mean, we'll look and see if there's any updates in the new literature about programs and not, but I think at this point we'll bring those issues, unless they're fairly minor, where we can put out a speed sign on a temporary, you know, your speed is sign on a temporary basis. We'll bring those to the board.
Okay, great, thank you. So good discussion too about the speed, the radar, bringing that up. So now we're going to move on to the specific request by someone in Toftrees to have the permanent radar detection signs on Cricklewood. And so I guess,
Yeah, Public Works and Police had compiled some information just to give you a sense of what's out there in terms of these radar signs. Chief Jelly found a summary of 17 cases, looked at radar signs, and then we noted that they all seemed a little old, so he went back and found 4 more that were distributed today. I think the summary is still the same. Almost every study finds that they're very effective in the short term in reducing speeds, and then there's a lot of variance in the effectiveness over the long term. Some studies say there is continued effectiveness to keep speeds down, others say it goes away after time. And then we looked at, provided you an analysis or at least a classification of streets. You know, if you look at an ADT as a cutoff, you know, what kind of mileage in the township would we potentially be looking at it for this type of a program? We also had some discussions with PennDOT. You know, since these have electronic flashing parts to them, we have to get a permit from PennDOT for any installation, which will add a few $100s to the process. PennDOT, we asked about installing them on PennDOT roads. We haven't got a final answer yet. PennDOT does have some of their own that they deploy on a temporary basis, and they do move them around. If we wanted to include PennDOT roads in this program, those are the PennDOT roads that have homes along them in Patton Township that are basically 2 or 3 lane roads. Doesn't include them Atherton Street or I-99, obviously. I think, yeah, so that's information we compiled without making any final determination of whether to move forward. We haven't done any, we provided an estimate of what the signs cost. They're somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 each. If we want to move forward, we can look at some of these thresholds and put together some costs on what a program might cost ultimately. And then finally, there's some questions for discussion here that staff is looking for direction from the board. If you want to continue on this path, is there a preference on setting a threshold? Should we include state roads? The third question came from some of the studies that were included in those case studies. You know, should we just include all school zones for the 3 schools in Patton Township as part of this program, or, you know, should this be part of a traffic calming program? I guess you can X that last question off. But, and then, if not, are there other alternatives that the board would like to see about maybe purchasing additional signs to move around as we have in the past?
Comments from the board?
My big concern is safety, public safety. So I think it's our responsibility to ensure public safety as much as we can. So I'm in favor of what the board is suggesting. We go ahead and do a comprehensive study and develop some proposals and cost estimates and that sort of thing. I did have a question for Chief. I forgot how many of these radar signs that
We currently have 3.
We only have 3.
Yes.
And you rotate them around. None of them are permanent.
I generally try to keep 2 of them in the school zones, this time of year, obviously, but as the need arises, we move them around, yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, just.
I thought I just heard you say that Doug, that it shouldn't be part of the last question, should this be part of a traffic calming program? Did I hear you just say that that doesn't apply?
Well, since we more or less got rid of the traffic calming.
Oh, right, okay.
The
So
prior item.
the moment before, okay, I have.
I mean, it can still be used.
Sure,
as-
okay. I
as-
just want to
as
make sure I
treatment,
understand
but-
what you mean, and I didn't miss something. I really think it should be, like in that great table we got from Trans Associates, I think it should be part of that sort of option idea as part of our traffic calming when we're considering. One of the studies here suggested it was really useful if there weren't other physical traffic calming options, like a speed table or something like that. And that really stood out to me as really relevant so that we have another potential tool. I think they seem like a great idea because they're compared to other things, they're not that expensive. They don't seem too intrusive. And then in terms of how would we decide where to put them? To me, it seemed like school zones made sense, and then the highest speed, because that's the most dangerous, and then highest to lowest average daily volume. And then I was also thinking a little bit about sort of infrastructure too. Is something going to have development or something? I think there's a pretty easy way you could have a priority sort of tree for it. But the evidence seems pretty clear that it's effective. I don't see why we shouldn't
Especially in
really
school-
get a comprehensive study, have a system going.
Especially in school zones.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're doing the study, except in talk trees, how long have we fussed over trying to come up with something at this one particular area? How many months is it?
Yeah.
A few years, and what have we actually done so far?
Well,
Little-
well, you're
So-
talking about, which area are you talking about? The intersection of Cricklewood and Tawtrees Avenue, or the
Speed
Beaumont?
bumps in and out, right?
Yes,
Apparently the.
probably both, but my point is that I think we should do the study, but I think if what we heard about the radar signs, that they almost universally
Work.
have worked for at least a short time,
Yeah,
would buy us enough time to
I agree.
complete a study while they're working. So in other words, we can temporarily solve the problem at least, and then work on something better, rather than not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I have one quick question, then we'll go to Mr. Lee. Mr. Park, sorry about that. Do we need permission from PennDOT to make a speed display sign permanent?
Technically, yes, but
Okay.
I don't think they'll withhold it unless there was some.
And then a follow-up question on that is, at what point does, we could have a mobile sign that stays there forever, which would then in fact, in some ways, be permanent, which is sort of what Elliot was getting at. Why not go ahead and put the sign out, just leave it there? I guess permanent means in the ground.
I was going to ask what that means.
Well, they're attached to pole,
Okay.
generally, we just put them on existing signposts now.
Okay.
So, the question is, if we're gonna do state roads with our equipment, then we'll have to talk to them on another level. But at this point, we can start putting together information, bring some costs back to you,
Great.
what we think it might run.
Great. Mr. Park, sorry about that.
Thank you. In general, one of the things you'll probably want to consider is those units that are out there are battery powered, and if you're going to make a permanent installation, you want something that's going to last more than 6 days at a time.
Sure, solar.
Yeah,
But
there are
with
solar.
respect to, yeah, with respect to the Cricklewood issue, I'd like to suggest that we've got all kinds of data, and if Alex and I can get some time in the next week or two to go over things like the golf course cart crossing study that had speed and volume data, and some of this others, then I'd like to think that we'd be in a position to come up with a reasonable proposal to present, much the way you did the Toftree Avenue thing, and invite the whole neighborhood out and say, okay, here's what we're thinking about. So if I could have some of your time at some point,
Yeah,
it'd
that's
be great.
fine. We can do that.
And I might suggest that when you invite the whole neighborhood out, that you choose a locale on Cricklewood Avenue. Just makes it easier for people to get out to,
Yeah,
really bring the
that's a good
show on the
idea.
road. So, my suggestion.
Bill's house.
So, do you have enough direction from the board to proceed?
Well, let me ask one specific, do you want us to get a couple more signs right now and put them out on top trees and
Sure,
Well, I was going to
at
ask.
President's Drive and see how it works, or?
sure.
Yeah, especially for President's Drive. But I have a question. So what impact would that have on the budget? As 3,000
Well,
per
it'd be
sign?
6,000 for 2 signs, one for each direction. It won't break the budget. but-
Okay,
It's not gonna break, it's not
Okay.
gonna, stop payroll or anything like that, so.
great, okay. Just wanted- Yeah, I think that's a great first step in parallel with proceeding on Cricklewood. Okay. Oh, and then I guess we don't have anything in planning and zoning. We're on to administration issues, and the first is cost-sharing agreement for the solar power energy consultant. And we have a copy of that in our, it's attached with the agenda, and then we need to make a decision on it. So I didn't, Larry, do you want to give that presentation? Or were you at that meeting? I wasn't able to go to that meeting.
We've talked about this in the past. Basically, it's just an agreement for procurement of the energy consultant to go out and get the proposal for the consultant. Because of our electric usage as a percentage of the entire group, it looks like it's going to be no more than $793. We budgeted, I think, 1,500, so we're well under that. And based on what we have done in the past, I would recommend that we sign this agreement.
Great. So I'll seek a motion, and I think.
I'll move that we sign this agreement.
Second.
We have a second, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Any discussion?
Oh, any discussion? Any, yes, thank you.
And I suggest, as soon as we can, to hook up these radar signs to the solar power, so you don't.
Okay, it's a little more complicated, but yeah, that's good. And any discussion from the audience? No, nothing, so hearing none, I'll take a
Aye.
vote.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? So the ayes have it. So they trickle in. Okay. And pending work items for the board. This concerns items that have been discussed at previous times and sort of been put on back burners, and they continue to stay on back burners, and they appear often at the end of each agenda, so
Yeah,
take
I
it
wasn't,
away.
I apologize, Elliot, for the miscommunication. We got you up here now.
All right.
So compiled what everybody's responses were, and if you look at the priority listing, and then look at the score, the cumulative, or whatever, the aggregate score over here, the priority order the work on these would be sustainability resolution, and then budget stress scenarios, open space preservation items, authorities, dissolvement, and then the last two would be down on the bottom of the list. So I think I'll keep them all on the list for now and reorder them in that process. We'll probably look at some of the budget stress stuff maybe at the next meeting. So I already started working on that a little bit. So.
Good idea.
I mean, if everybody's happy with that
Sure.
result, then I
Yeah.
don't think there's any more actions needed on that.
Yeah, no, thanks for taking that initiative.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Great, and a great way to do it. So we are up to the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda include the treasurer's bond limit, the expenditure approvals and mileage rate, bank depository, reappointments of the solicitor, auditor, and other
There
officials.
is no voucher report.
There's no
Skip
voucher
that.
report. It includes appointment to the Center County Airport Authority, and it includes the minutes of only December 11th, and not the 9th. So
No, we
do,
had the meeting, the ones for 9th were, that was that work session we had for,
right. Yeah. For the top trees and,
yeah, so they're both in there.
oh, I thought you mentioned that you didn't see those minutes.
No, I said it, I didn't see the voucher report.
Oh, the voucher report, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it wasn't in there, so we'll do that on the 22nd.
So I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Opposed? So we're up to the manager's report.
Big news in the municipal government world that state took action that we can do intergovernmental agreements by resolution in lieu of ordinance now. It saves us money and time. So in the future, it streamlines that process a little bit. There was the housing starts for fourth quarter 2019 were in there. We're still, in essence, have been flat for about the last 5 years on new single-family housing starts in Patton Township. And not sure if we're going to see an uptick this year or not. There are more lots available this year than there have been in the last few years between Toft Trees and Grace Woods. I did notice off the end of Bow Manor and Victory, there's a lot of lots that have been already sold out there. So hopefully we'll see some new construction starting out there sometime this year. Again, this will come up every meeting. Census Day is April 1. It's very important that everyone complete the census, or if you don't want to complete the whole thing, at least put down how many people are in your household. There'll be tons more information coming out this year. There will be an option to do it, to respond online. You'll have an option, you'll have the opportunity to pick that option sometime in March. There'll be a mailing that will go out to everybody with your options on how to respond. But online will be one of the options this year. Item D, upcoming events. We are closed on the 20th for Martin Luther King Day, and in February 17th, President's Day. ABC Appreciation Dinner is February 21 at Toft Trees. Another item E is just something I've included every year at the first meeting. Permits were down last year, off from what they'd been the prior couple of years. We didn't see any significant large building projects last year. We'll keep an eye on that coming forward. Item F, snow parking. It may snow sometime this year. I bought a really big snow blower, so maybe it won't, but odds are it will snow at some point. There's a chance of half an inch tomorrow or something like that. So.
Good thing you got that snowblower, yeah.
But if it does snow more than 2 inches or a snow emergency is declared, then there is no parking on township streets. and remind everybody who has sidewalks that you must clear your sidewalk of snow and ice for the full width of the sidewalk, not just one shovel width, but the full width of the sidewalk, within 24 hours after the end of the storm. There's another item, we had talked about the National Citizen Survey back in November. I got some updated pricing from the borough. It was included with the supplemental materials. I didn't know if it
Yes.
changed enough to move anybody's. Before, the board was not interested when we were talking somewhere between 9,000 and 25,000. There's a couple lower priced options now. This is all doing things in concert with the Borough State College when they do theirs. So there's an opportunity to send out some mailings along with them and get some returns. If you have an idea now, let me know. If not, we'll touch on it again on the 22nd if you have an answer.
Any comments?
No.
Anybody? I hope to read it.
Okay, I'll report back, we're not interested. And final item on the supplement, the COG administration has asked if we'd like to host a general forum meeting in this room. Many, 10 years ago or so, it was custom to rotate the general forum meetings around, and then after COG built their nice new building with a nice big general forum room, we reverted back to primarily just doing general forum meetings there. I think there might be one at the borough every once in a while when they want to highlight some things, but they have asked if you'd like to host one here.
I see.
I have two questions about that. How much extra work is it for you guys to do that?
It's a little bit of extra work,
A little
but
bit.
mostly it's extra work for COG staff.
Oh, okay.
They come in and they have to
They
come
do
in and
most
do all the setup and probably bring in extra tables, and it really fills the room up.
Well, I
It's
was
like, it's
thinking-
like an MPO meeting.
Well,
if
I
you've
was
been in
thinking
here
maybe
for an MPO
maybe
meeting.
then Betsy could chair a COG meeting. If you're gonna be chairing COG, would you wanna chair that one?
Oh, that'd be kind of fun. We could work out some sort of.
What do you think? Is that allowed?
I didn't get it.
If,
I didn't.
if we have the COG meeting here, if Betsy could run that one.
Fine. You can
So
run
is that-
any,
are you
you can
allowed?
run
Is
any
that
of them
weird?
that you want.
Whatever the COG wants to do, right?
I don't know, do you want to? You get the
Should be
chance?
fun, yeah, sure.
It's closer than the COG building.
Right. I don't know, it's
For
up to
me.
you.
Well, other than showcasing Betsy, what benefit to us is there? I
Oh,
don't
no.
see a benefit.
There
There's
isn't.
nothing we're trying to
Hmm.
brag about. I mean, if we had a new meeting room or something, all newly decorated or something, it'd
Then
be
maybe
nice to
it's
brag. But I don't know why we need the extra work.
Doesn't
No.
cost a park here.
Well,
It doesn't cost a park.
there's not very much parking.
Parking.
It does.
Yeah,
Actually,
generally, people have to park up on top.
That would be a problem.
It
That
does
would be a
Yeah,
problem.
I
it's
think
a
it's
little
a lot
bit
of
of a
trouble.
pain, but.
If it's too much
For
trouble, that's
very
fine
low,
too. Whatever.
Benefit.
I don't really
Is
feel
there enough
strongly.
parking for?
Usually, people have to park up in the public works area.
I move that I have no strong opinion.
Thank you, you're very helpful.
Well, I actually, my opinion is I like the idea of having it here.
Okay.
Because I personally like traveling around. It sort of mixes things up and adds a little bit of spice. So it is a little bit more work. Plus, we have the advantage of now, and I was going to introduce this at the last, other items, but we now have our electric vehicle charging station
Ooh.
up and running.
Well, not quite.
Well, the person
they-
is,
Soon.
the person
They turn it
installing
on?
it today.
Okay.
The person installing it today, when I went up and talked to him, and I expressed a glee, and he looked a little perturbed, but he said, well, if you got your car right here, if it plugs into this, you can do it right now. I said, no, thanks, I'm not there yet, but, so that is a perk.
Well, I'll second your motion then.
We could, we could show that off. Or we could invite whoever has an electric vehicle to charge.
Yeah, I know. Donnell.
A lot of people get a
There you
charge.
go.
Of course, they-
Yeah.
A lot of people get a charge out of it.
Okay, well, I'll report yes.
With the proviso that we
I'll get him to do it sometime where we're not planning for snow.
Good, when there's a little bit of light out there, and you can see the EV station.
I guess we'll look at it.
But tell them to mention the perk on the invitation.
May.
May. Sounds good.
We need to vote on that, or you okay with that, Dan?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. That's the end of my report.
Okay, and I lost track, so committee reports.
Ladies, yeah.
We don't have committees, but there was some action in December. Oh, no. Well, actually, we must have reported,
Yeah, there wasn't
I
anything
think we've
after
reported
that.
on all of them. And we reported on the solar power purchase agreement. Okay, great. And other business has already been, one item has already been mentioned. Anybody else have any other business?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.